And so when I talk about saving energy, we really talk about, you got first, how am I going to measure it? So when we talk about saving 29%, hitting 10% type of reductions, what we want to wind up talking about, if this would be a fairly typical power curve, or energy curve. This is 2 different years, same days, same days of the week, same week of the year over year. And so this actually was one year where this was the earlier year. The next year, following year, we actually had dropped that. And this is we're making parts, and then you get into our second shift, and at that point, our volume had dropped a lot, and so we weren't producing a whole lot there. And then we had this period here where we weren't producing anything. And then first shift would come in, and you'd repeat that cycle, and then you get to the weekend, and you drop down there. So it was a couple cool things out of this. You can look at year over year, we had some energy reduction for this, trying to make the same number of parts on first shift. Really hadn't changed that. Some of this is climate related, temperature. If it's cooler, if it's hotter, you got to adjust for that. But we also had started learning how to run more efficiently and effectively while we ran. And for the ones of you that haven't participated with one of the RMI green teams, I really do encourage you to do that, because this is something that is out there to be gotten as well while you're running. So when I talk about energy effectiveness, so what I want to talk about, let's take the dark one here just for grins. That line there, and you go, yeah, okay, we call that's about 100%. You can kind of draw a line through that. You don't have to be perfect. This is not calculus. They wouldn't have me up here if it was. What does that look like compared to where you're at here on the weekend? And so if you're like most companies, and you're shutting down and you're walking out, if you compare here to here, that's about 30% of what it takes to run, even though you're not making anything. And you stop and think about 30% of what it takes to produce when you're not running. That's a really big number. I'll give you a for instance. I didn't give you perfect numbers because then Ruth would have to shoot me. She's our finance manager. But at our plant, if you look at electricity, it's over $1 million a year. And if you look at the last plant I was at, it was over $1 million a month. I mean, you got some seriously big numbers on that. And we got plants that consume more energy than that. I don't know where you're at, but interestingly enough, when you look at the percent that's out there to get, it's still a lot. Because if you're a smaller producer, a smaller company, those dollars mean even more on here. Your General Motors, everyone's going, why are you bugging me to turn the lights out? Why are you bugging me to unplug that? Why are you bothering me about the microwave being hooked up? Just like your kids do on that. So what we're going to talk about is going from here down to here, and the kind of things that it's going to take to do that. And we'll talk a little bit on the potential dollar savings on there. So if you look at why do I care, if you call that first peak, what it takes to make parts, you call that 100%. Just call it 100. Whatever your number is, that's 100. So if you're running, this would be if you're running a 3-shift operation. So first shift, you're going to 100. Second shift's going to be 100. Third shift's going to be 100. You keep that going 5 days a week, and then you drop down to 30% of that. So you do the math there, and you look at what that would give you in total number of units. Now, if you were to drop that to 10% on the weekend, just the weekends, because you don't have an off shift in this particular scenario, and I know energy costs vary during the week, yada, 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 but you're talking about a 7% savings if you're running 24 hours a day, 5 days a week on that. So whatever your energy costs are, 5%, not 5% of the weekend cost, 5% of your annual cost. I'm sorry, 7% of your annual cost. That's a lot of money. Most of us would do a lot of stuff for 7%. If you made 1 million units, it's what, $71,000? $1,000 a week? That's pretty good turnaround for someone turning the lights off. You can get there that way. If you do, and it's obvious, but it's not necessarily intuitive. If you're running a two-shift operation, like in our case, we've got 2 extended shifts, and we're off on Friday. But if you did a two-shift operation, so you'd have 100 of those units first, 100 on second, and then you're down to 30. 100 to 130, you'd have that pattern repeating all through the week. You did 30 on the weekend, but then you change it to 10. You got the potential for about a 16% savings on there. And as much as we'd like to all be running 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, we usually aren't. I mean, obviously that's where you want to be, but you usually aren't on there. So when you think about it, minimum 7% available to go out there and get, maybe 17, and if you're really hurt and you're running a one-shift operation, the number gets up even higher. So you're talking about some serious dollars that, I didn't have a prop, so that's a prop, but I was thinking on the way here, what I really should have had was for a light switch, the equivalent of turning stuff off. It's out there to get, not theoretically. Because when I was at Flint, we went and we got that plant down to about 10% on the weekends. The plants that were doing better were down in Mexico. They'd get down to about 8% on that. Their utility costs were higher, so some of the ROI stuff to get that last little bit, made sense for them. We're now down, about 13% on the weekends? Where's Lorenzo? So about 13% on the weekend. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was supposed to do something so you wouldn't be holding all those things. But about 13% on the weekends, where before, we were in the 30 or more percent range. We're talking some serious dollars on there. So I asked how many people I'd met from the General Motors Baltimore operation. What do we make there? Anybody know? It's not you guys. Yes, sir. Okay, that's a cup. A1000 transmission. What else? Electric motors. There's another one. What do they go into? That's my last product ever.
Spark.
No, the Spark. Spark EV. So Mark, right here. And what other transmissions go into? No, you can't have 2 cups. Sorry. No, not Spark. Okay, so for the ones the truck goes in, the transmissions go into heavy duty pickup and Silverado. Interestingly enough, for the market we're in, I actually reminded someone today, everything we make is an option. Nothing is a standard equipment. So it's important to keep our costs down. People are paying extra for it, yada yada. But with that, there's a lot to be had. So what do you got to do to go get that? On that, we actually use the RMI Green Team to help energize ourselves with green teams and getting folks engaged in shutting it down. And a lot of it, as silly as it sounds, there is a lot to be gained really easy with lights. We have enclosed team rooms, making sure the air conditioner's off. You can hang meat in there some weekends if you didn't go behind it and pay attention. Turning off the computer terminals. How many air handling units you got? How many does it take? Because we had 15, I think we had 15. Guess how many were running on the weekends? Or 15. Guess how many needed to run? It wasn't anywhere near 15 that needed to run. So things that we thought we were good at, because if you walked in the plant, the lights are off for the most part. But when you go through and go line by line, station by station, you can find all sorts of potential, and that part's been that way at every plant I've gone to. So how do you hold on to that? There's not you're not going to see a big advertisement for this magic software in the sky. You got to get out there and just do the grunt work. Somebody's got to get out there and do the grunt work and go through and audit. Because once you figure out what can I turn off and get, and you see that energy reduction there. You got to get it back to the teams, the people that own that section of the floor, and they got to audit it. We've actually gotten to a point now where on our level 5 team boards, they're monitoring themselves to, did I get through that audit, that shutdown checklist, and get the energy reduction that's there. Now, there's certainly more to be had if you get into some more of the sophisticated, like say, air handling units, raising your plant temperature, on the weekends, getting into some more task lighting. We've gone through and put on some of the motion sensor detectors, etc., for those other kind of savings on here. But if you don't do that, what you'll do is you'll see a blip. But if you go after it, and even to the point for the ones that are running 2 and 3 shifts, you're probably not on that last shift, and you may not want to come in on that last shift for a holiday when it's going to be really long. And guess what? Everybody and their brother wants to get out of that building. So you don't have to have a perfect measurement. Like if you aren't able to necessarily pull this picture up instantaneously, you've got ways to read about what that level is, and read what that level is, even without a pretty chart. And what we found actually effective is you set a target, whatever that number may be, and certain folks can't go home until you reach that. I mean, it sounds pretty basic, but if you just tell folks, go shut everything off before you go home, guess what? It ain't off. It's not off. You get a checklist, you get a little closer, and on those long weekends, when it's really critical to get down like that, somebody doesn't go home until it's off. And I tell you what, the first time that actually happens, and they got to go back out in that plant, 500,000 square foot, 1.5 million square foot plant, and find out what didn't get shut off, and then come back and check, and you make them go back out again, next time it's done the first time. I mean, it's a lot. It's basic manufacturing 101. What are you going to measure? How are you going to measure it? And then measure it. And then work to continuously improve on it. But the savings are huge. Now, are we perfect? We'd have to pretty much say we're probably not perfect. Not yet. For instance, even though, so right now, we are leading the pack for all U.S. transmission plants. And we would be better than where we are right now, but we actually have these four large furnaces because we heat treat our plants. So you got a lot of energy. You can't shut them down because it takes 2 days to heat them up, takes 2 days to cool them down. That doesn't work on a 2-day weekend. So they got to stay on, which generates all sorts of extra exhaust and extra heat. But this was actually a audit that Lorenzo did. Lorenzo is our site utility manager. I think I got that right? He's the power dude, okay? And he goes around and looks department by department and gives feedback. Now this is after the team has already shut down to that checklist. We keep giving that feedback back, and I think actually now he's got it where you just do it on your smartphone on that. I was looking for a piece of paper because that was pretty simple, but he put this list on a smartphone, and then that goes out immediately on here. So we know next week, get this off. Folks are watching. It does matter. One of the things you'll find if you choose to head this way is that your employees probably have no idea how much energy you're using. I know when I was at Canada, that's where we're using $1 million a month. And there was a lot of pushback, and folks are going, why are you making us do this? Why are you having us turn the light off? Now when they find out that it's $1 million a month, and you don't even have to tell them how much that light burns on the weekend, when they realize just how much that is, they start getting engaged. The thing for any other folks who have been through the green team, or my green teams, you find if you're working on energy shutdown and you show that that's a priority, you let the folks know why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, why you're going to do it, and why you're going to do it again, it'll spill over from the weekend. We actually have got our peak down. We're still producing transmissions in pretty much the same way. That over that 100% level is lower than what it was because people are looking for ways to shut it down. I can go over to E-Motors right now, and that's one of our newer plants. And during lunch, it's all lights out. I mean, that is really, really cool. It's a bit of a cultural thing because the plant was not set up to do that because we set it up to make stuff, not to not make stuff. And they've shut that down completely. It's getting better on the transmission side of the house, but it's an older workforce. They've got habits that you got to work on. And in a lot of cases, we find we did not give them a way to shut it off. Literally, there is no switch for them to go hit in order to shut that off and isolate that piece. Now, that's the easy stuff. You want to get good at it, then you're going to get into some of the harder stuff. Anybody got CMMs, coordinate measuring machines, out on their floor? Air bearings, right? And what are you told if that shuts off? The world will end, right? Because that $1 million machine, $500,000 machine is not coming up on that. Therefore, you can't do anything with the with the compressors, right? You will hear that, and then you'll find the next one's got their pet thing why you can't do it. And I'll tell you what, some of it is absolutely valid. One of the plants, every robot we had in the plant, it wasn't, you say maybe 100 robots. Every robot we had in the plant had pneumatic grippers. So when you're setting up a program, you can either go pick up a part, do something with it, go to home, and call that where you're in your cycle, or you could, let's say, do other stuff and end up with a part in your gripper, right? Well, it turns out that's what we did. Cut power, boom, robot starts dropping parts all over the place. So you're having to go back through, change those things, or in some cases what we found was we could isolate the pneumatic circuit that had the CMMs on it or had that robot on it and just shut the other ones off. But it was until you really stick with it and prove that we're going to do this, it's important to do, you're going to find those horrible stories of CMMs. You can't do that because the world will end. And it probably will if you go do that without proper shutdown and startup. So I think that might have been getting close to the end. So it's not rocket science. It really isn't. It takes a lot of just digging. And I mean just getting out there and talking with people and talking to them again and reinforcing time and time again that it's important to the business. It's important. The business is important to their future. Therefore, this is important to their future. And once they get it and buy in on it, then you'll know they did when they start grabbing you as you're walking down the aisle and go, hey, what about this? You know, if we did this, I could shut that off. Then you know it's starting to click. Until then, they may only be doing it because you got this list and you're auditing. Keep that up until it becomes ingrained. Because that's 7 to 16%. It's out there to get. And maybe more.